This space is dedicated to Lee the Glassman from the Glassman Legal Group, guiding my clients through the process of buying or selling properties in South Florida. Also, he is here at the disposal of my foreign national clients looking to invest in residential real estate.
So I'm here today speaking with Maria Cury from Bricks Real Estate here in South Florida, and we're talking about dealing with foreign nationals and some of her buyers that come from South America who are looking to invest in real estate in South Florida and perhaps the rest of the United States. My name is Lee Glassman. I'm the senior partner and managing partner of the Glassman Legal Group, and we're a boutique real estate law firm here in South Florida that handles all of Anne Marie's clientele who come through looking to buy or sell property. She is one of the top producers in South Florida as it relates to residential and commercial real estate, and has a niche with regard to buyers from the South American countries who are looking to perhaps initially invest in real estate in the United States and then ultimately maybe even set up residency, or at least to continue their investments in the United States. So we were talking about setting up corporations for your individual buyers who come in the state of Florida. And one of the facts that is very important for any buyer, but specifically foreign nationals, are that a lot of the loan process works a little differently than a standard typical buyer that you might see in the United States. And so a foreign national has certain different requirements. There are not a lot of lenders, although there are several, but not a lot of lenders who actually provide residential first mortgages to foreign nationals unless they're putting at least 30 or 35% down as a down payment. So what we recommend to a lot of buyers who come in from South America or other parts of the world to establish roots, at least in real estate, and we've done so forth with some of your clientele, which I think is an excellent recommendation that you make as a realtor who knows the industry, is to set up perhaps either a corporation or an LLC. Now, what is the difference between a corporation or an LLC? An LLC is basically what is called a limited liability company, and pretty much it acts as the same as a corporation where there's no personal liability for that individual. And so what we do is we like to recommend to people that if in fact they're going to purchase a piece of property, to set it up in an LLC or a corporate entity, and basically that way the company itself owns the property, with the person maybe being either the manager or shareholder of that company. But they are not personally liable if something was to happen on the property. And so let me give you an example. A lot of foreign nationals will come in and buy investment property to rent out either to a yearly tenant, or in this day and age, a lot of them do the Airbnb or VRBO. And so what we recommend is if somebody was to hurt themselves at the property, such as a tenant, and they maybe slip and fall, or God forbid get hurt even more, or one of their friends or family members comes over to the property and they hurt themselves. The question is, what is the liability for the owner? So you might have a lease agreement that says that the tenant or person renting the home has to carry their own insurance policy, but that might not be good enough when they potentially seek counsel to potentially sue the owner. So what we recommend to especially foreign national investors, but investors in general, that they basically set up the property as ownership, not individually, but through this LLC. So if in fact a tenant or somebody who's hurt on the property ends up suing the owner of the property, the owner is that LLC and not the person individually. And so these are some of the things that must be taken into account when a person coming from another country or even if they live here and they're buying investment property, has to take into account when they're setting up the title or ownership of the property. And so it's extremely important that any person buying or selling, has a realtor who has an incredible knowledge, such as yourself, with regard to how the property should be set up ownership-wise, but also that that realtor surrounds herself or himself with an incredible team that is able to guide the purchaser or seller through the transaction process. Now, a lot of people seem to think it might be relatively easy, and I sign a contract and then I show up at the closing table and that's the end of it. But unfortunately, as you and I know from personal experience, it just doesn't work that way for the most part. And so when a contract is initially signed, there's then steps and processes that people have to go through. So I like to talk about, as we always discuss, is the initial signing of the contract. And the contract that's utilized in the state of Florida is what is called a FAR contract. And pretty much it's a joint venture of the Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar. And there was a time where I was on the committee that several years ago where we collaborated or joined together and tried to come up with a contract. And so every several years there's an updated version as to what nuances or what things come about that maybe we didn't anticipate the years before. And so, but the contract is still has quirks in it and still has nuances that it's extremely important that the realtor and her team are able to explain these differences in the contract versus just telling the client, please just sign here, initial here, and that's the end of it. And so it's extremely important from the beginning of the process that the realtor, along with myself, maybe their lender of contact that they utilize, if it's for a purchase, is able to guide the buyer through the process. And we have dealt with numerous clientele over the years, both American and foreign nationals, who might be an extremely successful and or intelligent as it relates to their industry, but when it comes to buying or selling a home, they might not be as proficient in that. And that's why it's incumbent upon the realtor, such as somebody like yourself and your team, to be able to not only hold the hand of the buyer or the seller, but put them through the process to make them feel at ease. And you know, my mother told me a long time ago that you are a reflection upon whom you deal with or refer. And so in her mind, she was like, you know, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are.
And that is absolutely true.
So in the real estate industry, I always like to recommend to people that you are a reflection upon whom you refer. And so there are plenty of realtors, there are plenty of other people in the real estate industry who really may want to try to control everything, but sometimes that just doesn't work. And so what I suggest to people is that, you know, listen, go to somebody who has the knowledge, the educational background, and the experience to lead you into certain things. So as a realtor, you're excellent in showing a prospective buyer or seller with their listing on what the pros and the cons are, what a comparative market analysis might be of the property, why you're making the decision that this is the recommendation that you're looking to list the price at, and this is because what the area has been drawing, and what your home may have or might not have. And I understand it's a fine line because you certainly don't want to insult anybody saying, well, your house doesn't really have the knockdown walls that somebody might want, somebody might not want. It might not have the travertine floors that you're looking for, and that is something that you see in maybe more expensive houses versus a standard 12 by 12 tile that maybe came from the builder. And so the realtor is going to be the one who has that knowledge with regard to the homes. With regard to the contractual, that's where when a realtor such as yourself surrounds themselves with extremely knowledgeable people in various parts of the industry, it really helps your clientele ultimately get to the end line, which is either buying a home or selling a home. And certainly if it's buying a home as a foreign national who is really very hesitant on putting their money into the United States because they're not familiar with what goes on here and perhaps maybe in their country, it creates a feeling of comfort for that person. And I think that's extremely important.